It's so ironic. Just before I turned on this video, I was watching CNBC and I saw some guy on a commercial basically saying that if you, I guess, email him or scan some code, he's going to send you a stock pick. And I guess that stock's going to go up. I don't know. But anyways, it just goes to show you that this whole industry, as far as like stock trading and options trading, there's a lot of like strange information out there. And that's what this channel is about. Basically, if you're new to this channel, my name is Darren Woodfork. I'm an attorney, and I'm trying to help my mom get started in options here. And so that's kind of what this channel is about. Basically, and I started from the very beginning, like when I was explaining to my mom, you know, what options are. She understands like the stock market. She has her Charles Schwab account and things like that, but she's never really traded options or doesn't even know what options are. So basically, I'm telling her kind of what they are. If you've never, ever heard of options or you never traded options, that's what this channel is about. And so let's just get started. An option is essentially the right but not the obligation to buy a stock. Essentially, the best way to say it is kind of like a ticket to control 100 shares of stock. It's an option on buying stock. And basically what it means is that if you say you have a $60 stock a stock that costs $60 a share, if you were to go out and buy that stock, it would cost you $6,000 to buy 100 shares of that stock. Instead of doing that, instead of spending $6,000 on that, you can maybe spend $200, you know, and buy an option that controls that 100 shares of the stock. And so maybe you have that much leverage. Basically, you can trade that stock. And essentially, if you hope the stock goes from 60 to 70, you can buy an option at 70 for $2, and then if the stock goes above 70, you'll make money, and you only have to spend $200 or so. So that's kind of overview what the stock option is. Now within that, there's a lot of different little parts of it that you should know about, and so in the options market, really the big picture is that you need to know what's called a call. A call is basically you buy an option hoping that the stock goes up. You make money if the stock goes up. A put is if you make money if the stock goes down. And so if you think the stock's going to go down, you buy a put. If you think the stock's going to go up, you buy a call. That's the most basic thing when it comes to trading options. The next level under that is kind of whether or not you can sell a call or sell a put. Essentially what that means is that all these calls cost money. So if you're going to buy a call, you're going to pay money for that call. But if you sell the call, you're going to receive money for that option. And then if the stock if the option doesn't cross the expiration, or if it expires worthless, then you keep that premium that you received when you sold the call. So you can sell calls and you can sell puts the same way. And so that's just basically the flip side of buying them. Also, like I just said earlier, the contract for the amount of stock that you control with a option is usually 100 shares of a stock. Now, when it comes to knowing what the strike price is, that is the price where your stock makes, or your option makes money. And basically, if you have, like I said, if you have a option that expires or has a strike price of 70, if you have that $60 stock and it goes above 70, that 70 is your strike price, and that's when it crosses that level, that's when you start to make money. Or even on the downside, if you have a put and you have that, you bought that stock, that you bought the option when the stock was at 60, and you buy like a $50 put. Once that stock drops under $50, that strike price, then you start to make money. So that's what the strike price is. Also, when it comes to options, you need to be aware of the expiration, and that's when the stock expires. The option expires, and that's the big difference between options and stocks. Essentially, the option is going to expire at some point in time. It could be, every third Friday of the month, or they could be weekly options that expire every Friday. I think there's options that expire every day, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But definitely weekly and definitely monthly options, and that's the expiration. So you have to understand there's an expiration date when it comes to options, and that means that you have until that day when it expires for your stock to do what you want it to do, and if it doesn't, then you're going to lose all your money. Unlike if you were into a stock, if you're just wrong on a stock, you can sit there basically and hope that it comes back up. There's no time pressure when it comes to stocks. But on the options there is for sure, and that's what the expiration date is. And you have to be very careful about that. And that's kind of what the insider trading issue was. And I talked about this in the previous video, and I'll put it up in the card also, is that because options expire, when somebody has an option and they have like insider information and they see that these options are super cheap, and the fact that they're going to expire worthless, if somebody dumps a bunch of money into that, that's when the SEC and the DOJ and things like that, that's when they get notified, or that's when they become alert, because they look at this and they say, well, this person spent millions of dollars on an option that's going to expire in 2 days. In 2 days, it's going to be completely worthless, and so they're going to lose $2 million if the option expires. But in that scenario, if the insider has information that's going to come out on Thursday, and the stock pops and they make money, then again, they were right because they had inside information. And it's the reason why it's so suspicious is because, again, it was going to expire completely worthless. But in fact, it makes millions and millions of dollars because they had inside information. And again, that expiration is kind of why the SEC, and that's why the DOJ and things like that, that's how they get notified of insider trading. The other thing, what I was saying, I think in a previous video, I talked about how the puts are good insurance. And basically, again, the put is if you buy a put option if you think the stock's going to go down, or if you're worried about the stock going down. So basically, if you want to just have insurance on either, like I said, if you have a bunch of gains in the stock market and you don't want to sell your stock, you can just buy a put, an out of the money put. And then if the stock market goes down, you lose the money, you lose your profit that you had on the stock, but you'll gain money on the put that you have. And so that's why a lot of people use puts when it comes to trading stocks. Also, and I talked about this in the video, the previous video, is that companies use puts. They use these puts to hedge their risk. I think I talked about the example of the airlines who need oil for their flights or for their planes. If the price of oil goes really high, then it's going to cut into their profits. And so, in order to hedge that, they'll go out to the options market and they'll buy calls. They'll buy the option where they'll buy the option if it makes money if the price goes up. So they buy options on oil, and so if the oil goes up, they make money on their options. They lose money in their business, but it cancels each other out because they're hedged. And so that's how options are used, kind of like in the real world. I talked about that in that video, and I think that's a fantastic way to use put options. I will mention one thing also. The number one options trading strategy is what Wall Street uses, what the hedge funds use, what investment banks use, and that's they sell calls, or I guess they sell puts too, but they sell them. They don't buy them. And what I mean by that, and I talked about this earlier, is that when you sell a call, essentially you're collecting the premium for that call, and if the option expires worthless, then you keep that premium. And so what that means in practice, essentially, like I said, if you have a stock that's trading at $60 and you sell the $70 calls, if the price of the stock never gets to $70, then you keep the premium you receive for that $70 call. And so that's that's the number one strategy on Wall Street. That's what they all do. And I think that's interesting because, again, the public, when they just first get started with options, what they do is they buy calls. They basically say, they look at the options chain and they see how cheap these options are, and they're like, well, I'll just try to I'll just buy a lottery ticket essentially. And then if it's 25 cents, again, in my example of the $60 stock, if they buy some out of the money calls at say $90, and there's 25 cents it costs, they'll say, well, I'll just try, and then if the stock goes up to 90, then I'll make money. But that strategy usually fails, and so that's why, again, that's what retailers do, that's what the public does, but Wall Street, they do the opposite. They sell you that $90 call. I think that's interesting. But with that said, though, one of my favorite authors, Nassim Taleb, in his book, I think it's Fooled by Randomness, I think that's his trading book, he talks about buying out-of-the-money calls. And they call them crisis hunters. Essentially, they're buying all these way out-of-the-money calls if there's some big event in the world and the market just completely tanks, or I guess if the market goes screaming higher, he buys these way outdated calls. And essentially his theory was kind of he's going to lose money all the time because these are going to expire worthless, but every now and then he's going to make a ton of money when that crazy event happens. And so that's kind of his philosophy. Again, and that's contrast to what Wall Street does. Usually they sell that stuff, and they don't do that. And so I think it's interesting. I mean, again, I'm telling my mom if she's going to get involved, she should just sell covered calls. There's a reason why all the Wall Street people do it, and that's essentially, I guess it's the safest way, because you'll make money. The probabilities are much better if you do that. And so that's kind of what my thought is. And then I talked about how, my mom asked me, how is the price of the call made? How do I know? Like I said, say you have a $60 stock and you can buy a call for $2. She wanted to know, well, how do they come up with that $2? And basically it's a mathematical formula, but it depends on, I guess in the real world anyway, it depends on the volatility of the stock. It depends on how much time is left for expiration. And so that's kind of how it does in real life. I mean, there's a mathematical formula to it. There's I think the Black-Scholes model. I think they talked about in the mid-70s out of Chicago. That's the mathematical formula of how they price options. By the way, it's called premium. That's what the price of the option is. When you hear that term premium, that's what it means, the price of the option. So anyways, I hope that helps. Like I said, this is the very beginner discussion of options. Like I said, you have some definitions of it. And in later videos, I'll talk about trading strategies on how you can make money or give yourself a good chance of making money in the options market and all that. So if you like this video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Like I said, this is a very, very beginner's channel. If you have any experience in options trading, this channel is not for you. It's probably super, super boring. But if you're a very beginner, stay tuned on this channel, because I'll be talking about it from the very, very, very basics. So once again, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.